what made you get into the world of enabling people and their emotions?
My journey was a little shaky or rocky at times for sure, but I kept coming back to it. I kept coming back to it, just feeling like there was something pulling me. There was something that I had to do.
Not having somebody to listen to and talk to, how does it really impact into the need for talk therapy?
We are not designed to live in this nuclear way, that we are social animals, and those connections and support are very necessary.
What could be the monitoring factors to ensure that the boundaries stay in place or at least don't get extinct?
That a lot of that really starts at home. With a lot of people that I see, really that it hasn't been mitigated, right? And I think that's what I see when people show up in my office. I don't think that there's any way to do that perfectly for every individual.
Listeners, therapy is something that's really catching up the pace in today's world. And in India, with Supreme Court passing its judgment, where it's now essential for every education institute to have a mental health counselor within, with over 100 plus students. Today, we are going to be diving into something which is going to take us beyond the realm of talk therapy. And we will understand from our guest today how just talk therapy in itself is not sufficient. And we might need some time a bit more than that, usually in scenarios where trauma is involved or any form of abuse. And I will let the speak our guest of guest today to elaborate on that. But yes, before that, welcome listeners to another episode of We Are Listening, where we bridge the gap between wellness seekers and wellness providers, enabling natural healing for you and helping you identify your path to a healthier body and mind. I am your host, Pulkit Garg, founder of Anya Wellness. And today we have with us Tammy Valicenti, an internationally sought after psychotherapist, speaker, and trauma recovery expert with over 25 years of experience. Tammy is the creator of Transformation Solution, a powerful blend of EMDR, IFS, and evidence based therapies. Welcome, Tammy. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Pleasure is all mine, Tammy, and thanks a lot, for accepting our request to be on a podcast. Before we get into, the question and answer on why don't you introduce yourself to the room? What's your journey been so far, and what made you get into the world of enabling people and their emotions?
Thank you. That's an important question. I was on a journey, I think, from a very young age. I was called to be a psychotherapist as early as I can remember. And my journey was a little shaky or rocky at times for sure, but I kept coming back to it. I kept coming back to it, just feeling like there was something pulling me. There was something that I had to do. Looking back on the journey now, I realize that in a lot of ways it was a journey similar um, to what I think that I would have wanted, like someone to show up for me in a way when I was younger. And so I followed my path and what was called to me, and ended up really working specifically in trauma and substance abuse recovery.
Help me understand one thing before we get into the actual discussion of trauma and abuse recovery. I just shared about one of the recent judgments, which I myself was also waiting for a long time by the highest apex body of legal system in India, where it is now made mandatory for education institutions to have a mental health counselor within the education institute, and plus enabling students as well as teachers to understand what mental health is. How's the
Mhm.
scenario in the US and what are your thoughts around it? Why it should be made compulsory and why some of the countries are really lagging behind right now?
Yeah, I'm not sure why countries are lagging behind right now. I feel like services are being pulled left and right in so many areas. I mean, it seems to me, it sounds like it might be financial, but I don't, those aren't the trends that I necessarily follow. But it's imperative that we have mental health services, because mental health services isn't just mental health. It's biological health, it's neurobiological health. And I think a lot of people, including myself from younger ages, miss that connection, that mental health isn't something that's just in our minds, it's also in our bodies. And that's an important thing, and an important thing to know, and a distinction to make. I think a lot of people disregard it. It's like, oh, it's all in your head. It's not. A majority of it is actually in your body.
Well, Can you elaborate a bit on the mind body connection over here?
Right. So I talk a little bit about neurobiological health and the body's ability to heal. But before we get to that, neurobiological health is really the connection of the mind body, and it is the body's ability to transition from one state to another, from waking to sleeping, from rage to calm. And many of us living in the worlds that we live get stuck in either super high activated places where there's a lot of stress, muscle tension, those sorts of things, or the other end of the spectrum, which is a frozen state where we're indecisive and maybe depressed, might have difficulty reaching doing our tasks or the things in the world that we need to do. So anywhere in that continuum, either frozen state or super activated. But ideally, we want a neurobiological system that can really flow from one state to another, and navigate stress and tension, and joy and play more easily.
Help me understand this part, Tammy, where you mentioned that from a very young age, we are not told how to really embrace our emotions out there. And it varies from gender to gender as well out there. There are stereotypes being put for certain genders where they are not expected to be really emotional, or they're not expected to be expressive of themselves. So what are your thoughts around this? How can these, gender stereotypes related to emotions be really catered and move towards a place where they become more embracing?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really think that when we see humans as humans, not specifically genders, we can see that emotions are energy, and that energy has to be expressed and released. And without that, the body's ability to hold on to it, it's that holding on to it, that stuffing down, the blocking out, the pretending it's not there, adds stress to the system, and you see what we see now, which is a lot of dis-ease and a lot of mental health issues. And we're doing everyone a disservice, as you know, when we are not allowing one gender, one sector of our community to release and express what is biologically necessary in order to have a healthy body system.
Let's discuss about the different form of therapies that are there. And the most prominent one out there is talk therapy.
Mhm.
So before we dive into the pros and cons of talk therapy, can you help our listeners understand what exactly is talk therapy? And yeah, let's first discuss what exactly is talk therapy.
Sure. Traditional talk therapy is when you go see a therapist and you talk about the issues and problems. And there's various types of talk therapy, whether it be cognitive behavioral therapy, psychodynamic therapy, psychoanalytic therapy, and all of those therapies are very useful. There's connection that happens. There's analysis and figuring out issues, and there's support. And those are really necessary for a lot of issues. And talk therapy oftentimes stops short of what's necessary to affect transformative, permanent change.
Don't you think that with the advancement that's happening, and there might be difference of cultures as well? I'm coming from a place where in India I have seen where families used to be staying in a joint structure where we had uncles and aunts and grandparents staying all together. With urbanization kicking in, a lot of this has moved to nuclear family structure, where in some of the families it's only a single child with both the parents working, or even if you have a sibling, the parents are still working, and there's nobody to really help the children navigate their emotions through. What are your thoughts where not having somebody to listen to and talk to within the very close inner circle, the personal sphere, how does it really impact into the need for talk therapy, or gives sows the seed for something that leads to emotional health issues?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you already know, and your listeners already know that we are not designed to live in this nuclear way, that we are social animals, and those connections and support are very necessary. And when we don't have, we're growing up in homes where we're an only child, or we have a sibling, parents are working full time, and our aunts and uncles and grandparents aren't around, that we don't have that opportunity. It's not only to be heard and understood and seen in real time, and to have those moments of interactions of processing what's going on. Um, but within that connection, we're also co-regulating.
Mhm.
It takes another human or an animal for us to be able to regulate a lot of times. And when in that absence, you can see how that would affect our neurobiological health and ultimately our overall health. And I think that's where, given that nuclear families are kind of where the world is going, I think that's where mental health professionals can really step in and help. And that helps to co-regulate and to process and to work through, and to get the support that might otherwise be missing in this nuclear family culture.
I would like to add one more point over this, Tammy, where while families are getting nuclear, we don't have people to listen to. But what's the role of digitization over here, where the appreciations by siblings, friends, or parents is not being replaced by likes, conversations are not being replaced by comments. So what are your thoughts on that? How is digitization with social media really impacting? And children are finding it really difficult to differentiate between the real and the real world.
Yeah, I mean, it's impacting in so many ways, I'm sure you know, and it's isolating us even more. I think we've traded real connection and co-regulation with dopamine hits. So what we're experiencing is more a sense of addiction, which along with that becomes all of those things that go with addiction, which is loneliness, hopelessness, shame, inability to regulate our own emotions, among others. So I believe, and I think what we're seeing supports this. We're becoming sicker as a community, as a world community, and that AI connection, that social network or Instagram connection is not replacing that. It's not a replication for it, for sure.
But help me understand, tell me one thing, because we have got different channels available today. There is Instagram available, there's TikTok available, and plethora of these are some of the prominent tools which are really in trend these days. But yes, we have got other tools also available out there, channels available. What really makes a teenager or a young adult go so get so after a particular trend that it ends up with them losing their life? Some
Mhm.
of them just going for the inevitable because they're not getting the likes and comments, and
Mhm.
some just trying to be a part of the trend and then injuring themselves. I just was going through the radio the other day, and I heard that mother of a newly born child, probably the child was just 5 or 6 months old, and there's this new trend coming in where women are trying to stand over a cap of a glass bottle wearing a pencil size heel, and while trying that trend she fell down and broke her complete spine cage. Now, why people just go so blindly following these trends that they don't understand the body, the limits of the human body, as well
Mhm.
as what's really driving them to go for this?
Mhm. I think you alluded to it earlier. I think what's driving them is the likes and the connection that you're getting, and the dopamine hits that they're getting through social media, like whether it be Instagram or TikTok, and to be a part. I mean, here we are, in our homes alone, and social media might be one of the very few connections. And if I can get so many likes or so many comments, I might do anything to do that, or almost anything to do that, in the absence of other real, true connection. I think we've lost. I think we've lost our way.
As parents and friends, what could be the steps that could be taken. And probably my emphasis is over here on the parents, because the friends are also in the more or less the same boat. They're also sailing on the same route. How can parents and adults really help in navigating it to a better direction?
I love that question. And you know what? Years ago, I was working with a client who said to me, and I think he had 4 children at the time, younger children, but a little older than mine. And his advice to me was put those devices off as long as possible. I didn't truly understand what he was saying at the moment. It's really when smartphones were starting to come out. And if we can delay that as much as possible, give them the ability to form those connections and have their brains develop first, then they'll be way ahead of the game. And that devices can never replace the human connection. So spending the obvious answer, spending time with your children, engaging them in community activities, sports, groups, and the like, aside from and outside of the screens. And I guess I would add also in nature, I think we've lost that connection in huge ways. And I, I was speaking with someone years ago who grew up in the Ecuadorian forest in a indigenous tribe there. And she said, we don't have a word for nature because we are nature. There is no separation. And to use a word for that separates us from nature. So I think maintaining that connection from a very young age and throughout is a real guard against any of the negative effects of some of what we're discussing.
Well, that was something really insightful where you said that we are the nature. We don't really need a separate word for it. Really,
Mhm.
really, deep to get through it. But this brings me a different perspective altogether, Tammy, and it relates back to something which I experienced myself. With the advent of computers, probably that would be if I talk about my childhood, probably around 2008 or 2009 is when we had gotten computers in our house. And I was always a person who loved to play outdoor sports. Now, but I didn't have anybody else to play with.
Mhm.
If I am looking for playing football or cricket or badminton, I need a second person to be there. I cannot be just doing bowling and batting myself. S- And it used to get so hard find somebody who was open to go out and play.
Mhm.
Because if I talk about the years before, really, really computers became a mainstream thing within India, we used to get out of our houses at 5 a.m. in the morning and coming back at 2 or 3, all dirty, no idea of what we are eating or what we are not eating. We were just mad about playing in, that sun or soil, whatever was there. We were, busy playing. We were connecting with nature out there. But yes,
Yeah.
eventually, slowly and steadily, things are finding their ways just into the screen. Even today, if I have to find somebody to go out for a morning walk or an evening walk, it gets really difficult. Now, even if the parents take away that screen from away from the children, what's the alternative out there? How can this part of it? Because I know some of my friends who are very new parents. They are finding it very difficult. Okay, we have taken away the screen, but we want to spend time with children. We only have 1 or 2 hours which we can spend. Otherwise, we cannot go back to the work. We cannot earn for the livelihood. Now, for those remaining hours, how they keep get the children occupied.
Right. I wonder if we need more of a grassroots movement in our own communities as young parents. Can we create those groups? Like, for example, I know when my kids were younger, it gets really cold here in the winter, and we all become very isolated. And that I know that's difficult for us as young parents. So I got together with another parent who is she was into art, and so we created an art class in my home, provided snacks, so I'm wondering if, as parents, we can create those things for our kids ourselves if they aren't happening in the communities and find like-minded families because they're out there, right? Who are willing and eager to create those spaces for our kids.
Mhm. That's a nice suggestion. That's totally, I guess, parents would have to take that initiative to help their children navigate it and get activities to involve with. Because what I have observed with my niece as well,
Mhm.
it's that something they need to get involved with. They really need something to do. They cannot be
Right.
sitting idle.
I wonder also if, as we're talking about this, if and I don't know what happens in India, it's kind of all over the place in the States. Some schools allow devices, some schools ban them entirely, and then there's everything in between. I wonder if we need some concerted efforts on the school level and the government level to start regulating and really seeing the detriment to our children and making some boundaries, some rules, some laws around that so that we're not as family members, as parents in that alone.
I totally echo with that. It's a mix of things. Some schools allow, some schools don't. Primarily, which are the international board schools over here, they were a mix of smart classes as well as normal, regular, traditional methods. But yes, on the similar lines, if I remember correctly, it's Finland which has passed a law where students have to just study from their books. No devices, no smartphones are allowed in the school. The
Bless.
school hours and even the homework and everything is just on the traditional methods. No devices allowed.
Mhm. That's fantastic. Up to a certain age, certainly we have to learn devices at some point to be in the workforce if that's what we want to do. But I love that. I mean, to be a kid again.
If I see, if I've been following Finland closely when we were on our annual wellness journey, and when it comes to wellness trends, Finland and Norway, the Scandinavian belt is amongst the leading people out there, where they've got a separate happiness index also being measured on a yearly annual basis.
Mhm.
So, and budgets being provided by the government for people to go and have retreats and all those things. So that's something I believe governments across the globe should be replicating.
I agree with you 100%.
Amazing. Help me understand. We started the podcast to understand where talk therapy has its limitations. So, first, let's understand what are the limitations talk therapy has
Mhm.
and how can those be bridged and overcome.
Right. Excellent. So I think one of the primary issues that I see, and people come to me oftentimes, it's a last resort. I've been in therapy for years and nothing's changed. And if you listen to my talk, you'll hear me say the same thing, that I was frustrated in my own therapy, that I understood my patterns. I could have insight. I could express to you my emotions. I could feel my emotions, and still the patterns weren't changing, and I wasn't feeling better. So the limitations, I believe, is that we're very much, in societies and cultures where it's from our neck up. It's very cognitive, and it's ideas and thinking through solutions. And while some of that can be really helpful, most of what happens to us is stored in our viscera, it's stored in our neurobiology. And so by leaving our body out of the equation, I think we're missing probably 90%, just off the cuff, 90% of the information that we need to heal. And with trauma being stored in the body specifically. And when I mention trauma, I mean, almost anything. I mean, being in the world as a human is traumatic. It doesn't have to be a huge, I was in a plane crash or I, experienced abuse. It's simply, being bullied as a child or being rejected by a friend. So it can be the little things. It doesn't have to be a big T trauma, so to speak. Um, and so if all of this is stored in our viscera and shows up as muscle tension and disease and discomfort and emotional dysregulation, then let's bring the body into the equation and heal it from the bottom up. So top down is effective and has its limitations. So if we're working from the bottom up, so to speak, as well, then you're really looking at a more holistic approach that I think can be more transformative and more effective.
Understood. Understood. Having done so many episodes, I totally echo with this thought where we say that a lot of your emotions get manifested into the physical pain in the body or any physical ailment. And as an individual, I've personally experienced it where at times when I was not feeling so well, I was gloomy, I was sad, I could feel lower backache happening or me falling ill a lot. Uh, Unnecessarily out of the blue, I'm having a running nose, catching fever. And the day I started managing my emotions better, I decided, okay, I will stay positive, I will stay happy. I have seen a long difference between the duration since I've had my last episode of fever or cold and cough. So
Nice.
I myself personally experienced it, but as a child, when you're growing up or as an adult, there are certain experiences which really help you evolve as an individual.
Yes.
Now, I understand at times, within the education institutes or within offices or within the families as well, the boundaries get really blurred or even at times are completely, extinct. And things go to really extremes, which have very heavy repercussions on an individual.
Yeah.
Now, and it's a very dynamic and subjective space, but
Yeah.
how can it be navigated and what could be the monitoring factors to ensure that the boundaries stay in place or at least don't get extinct?
What do you mean the boundaries for that particular person?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, that's a complex question. Um, nothing comes to me off the top of my head specifically, except to say I think that a lot of that really starts at home. And if with a lot of people that I see, really that it hasn't been mitigated, right? And I think that's what I see when people show up in my office. I don't think that there's any way to do that perfectly for every individual, I think is the answer, right? And so I may do the best I can as a parent, and yet I'm still messing up, and that kid's still going to have some things to work on, right? Even though I had the best of intentions. Um, so I think the answer is it's going to depend on that individual's biology, experiences, and all of that. And then ultimately, there's going to always be something to work on because it wasn't done perfectly or navigated perfectly. I don't think our systems, our educational systems, our family systems are designed to meet each specific person where they are, right?
Yeah,
And I don't think there's any way to do that necessarily. I know suffering is going to be, a part of the human experience, and um, to be able to manage it with grace and ease, and to have that resilience. Um, I think we need safety and connection. So coming back to answer your question a little bit, I think it comes back to safety and connection with other humans in our family unit, beyond in our communities, and then beyond that, knowing that it's not going to be perfect and that we'll have to navigate that and figure that out later in life.
I understand. I agree with you. And I totally, echo with the point of connection out there, safety and connection, and specifically in the connection bit, because I personally believe where communication has a very important role to play out there. And either individuals find it difficult to communicate or they don't find people to communicate with.
Mm.
Either of the two situations, and that's where I believe the journey towards downward spiral starts,
Yeah.
and the person starts to get into their own cocoon and find it very difficult. For me also, during COVID, somebody really specifically mentioned to me, Pulkit, you get into your cocoon whenever there is a situation you have to face. And
Yes.
at that very moment, I really didn't realize it. I really didn't pay heed to it. But yes, in last 5 years, I have sort of, found it, that the person was saying it correctly. And now instead of hiding from that problem or situation, I face it. It takes me a lot of courage to, build up that courage and face it. I am nervous at times. My body is shaking. But yes, if I face it for that moment, I might find it very, very challenging. But yes, the moment goes away at that very instant. It goes away faster. Whereas if I keep ignoring it, if I keep avoiding it, it just sits in my head and it keeps eating me.
I absolutely agree. And when it's like working out. If you use that muscle over and over, it becomes easier. At first, you're exhausted and you're shaky and it's difficult. And as you work that muscle more and more, it becomes easier until it's just something that you do. Is that right?
That's true.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's becoming more and more difficult for us as humans, certainly post-pandemic, but even before that, I think studies have shown that we're becoming more and more isolated as humans,
Yeah.
and that what was once natural is something that is difficult for a lot of us to do. But as studies show later in life, those connections, those social connections, are actually what keep us alive. Folks who are older, who have richer social lives, live longer.
That's true. That's true.
Right.
After all,
Right.
if I remember the phrase correctly, man is a social animal, and we are slowly and steadily taking out the social from it.
Right. Right. I imagine also for certain genders, certainly for men, I don't think that emotional intimacy is something that we teach or we expect from men, and we're doing men and our communities and our families a disservice for that as well.
I believe that's a topic we can go on and on about, and me personally being a male, I can relate to it. Uh,
Mhm.
but yes, again, I believe it's for all the genders out there. And yes, with the way society has evolved over the years, there are now spaces coming up where men can also go and talk and express themselves. But yes, there's a lot of work to be done in the area where men who have been brought up with a very, in a manner where they are not told or taught how to express, or even if they are expressing, they are shunned. So in the later years, as an adult, they find it very, very hard to, really be expressive or be emotional, which often comes out as anger and various other extreme emotions, which they themselves don't understand at times.
Right, I absolutely agree because boys that are being raised, anger is allowed, right? And so if that's the only emotion that, or one of the few emotions that I'm allowed to express, well, there it is in spades. Um, I wonder if for some men, I've certainly in the culture that I was raised, that I'm steeped in, that to be emotional or to express emotions or to navigate emotional intimacy is not associated with masculinity, and that seems to be a real block for a lot of men.
I agree, totally agree on that, and can relate to the complete thought process out there. Um, Devi, before we move into understanding EMDR, help me understand, because we have been talking about safety and connection and family a lot. How can, the fights a child see within the family, especially between parents, transform into an abuse or trauma for that children or for that child specifically out there, or if they're siblings and children? And how does it reflect out there as they grow?
Great question. I think it really depends on the fight. There is fair fighting, right? And to see a parent disagree and navigate a fight well and then repair it is actually something that's really useful and helpful for a child. I think what you're talking about is something that's beyond that.
Yeah.
That can be, right, scary, and where a child feels unsafe. And when a child feels unsafe, if we think about going back to an ideal childhood, where a child feels safe to explore and to express and to play, and to be curious, those are all the things that we need to reach our developmental milestones. And when we're raised in a home that doesn't feel safe, a home that I'm very familiar with. I was raised by an alcoholic father, and he was also a Vietnam vet. And so, being raised in a home like that, we fail to meet the developmental milestones, and that has all kinds of effects going forward. So, for example, for me, it was being raised in a home like that where I didn't feel safe. There was a lot of shame, and a real sense of like, I'm not good enough. And so that that blanket over my experience didn't allow me to have the wings I needed to, or to feel safe and curious to explore the world and make connections, and to do what I needed to do in order to be a successful adult. I had to navigate it earlier, like I said, some twists and turns in there. So I think there's some real negative ramifications of being raised in a home where you don't feel safe.
I'm really sorry to hear that. And I know how it feels when you're not appreciated, and your experience as a child, talks much more beyond that, not just being appreciated. It's much more deeply rooted out there. Uh, but how did you really navigate it through? How did you find your way to enabling so many people out there and building such a successful career for yourself?
Mm. Like I said before, I was really pulled to be a therapist, and I wonder if that came out of my experience or if it was, divine pull or spirit or something. I'm not sure. Looking back, like I said before, it was a circuitous route. I didn't do well in school at times, and I kept saying, "No, I want to do what I want to do. This is really important to me." Um, and I think most importantly, like I said to you before, I was in my own therapy and I was frustrated by the lack of progress. I kept looking for something that would work. I kind of had this inner knowing like this isn't how it's supposed to be. It wasn't just that I wanted to feel better. I wanted to help the people that I was seeing feel better. And and talking to them and giving them guidance and support was helpful, but I knew there was more. And so um, I was motivated, like I said before, to be well and to help my clients be as well as they can. Ultimately, really, what I found is that we have everything we need inside of us, that the journey is connection, like we've been talking about. The connection is so important. And through connection with self, we're able to more connect to everyone and everything. So it was a journey of becoming me and loving me without that blanket of shame and I'm not good enough. And it was trying different therapies and different connections and different modalities that led me there.
Amazing. Um, so help me understand. We discussed about the limitations of, the talk therapy, and one of the ways you shared was EMDR. So what EMDR is and how it really benefits and bridges the gap, or the limitations of talk therapy.
Yeah, I love talking about EMDR. So EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It was discovered by Dr. Francine Shapiro about 30 years ago. Excuse me, and she noticed that when she thought of something disturbing and moved her eyes back and forth, that it became less disturbing. So she got curious about that. And out of that curiosity, she developed EMDR and the protocol. So EMDR is different than typical talk therapy because it really brings the body into the equation. So in a typical session, there's some prep that goes before this, but if you came to me because you have fear of flying and the last flight you had was horrible and traumatic or difficult for you, we would target the flight, let's say. And so we'd go through what do you see, what do you hear, what do you smell, what do you taste? We bring all the senses into the space, and then combine that with what are you feeling in that moment, and where do you feel it in your body? And we add one more thing. What's the negative belief about yourself as you sit on that plane in that moment? I'm out of control, let's say. So we pair all of that together. We put all of that together and we pair that with a bilateral stimulation, which is the eye movement in EMDR. And when we do all of that, the emotions are able to release from the body and you're able to consolidate some of the memories and connect them to other memories. So for example, I also want to mention that eye movement is not the only way for bilateral stimulation during the EMDR therapy. Most people choose not to use that anymore. They find it difficult or distracting, and it's been shown and proven that any bilateral stimulation is just as effective. So it can be tapping from one side of your body to the other, or vibrations in your hand back and forth, or sounds in your ears back and forth. As long as you've got headphones on and it's bilateral, it's just as effective. So it works by consolidating memory, meaning connecting that experience with other things, because trauma isn't stored like typical memory. Typical memory is connected to other experiences, emotions, and sensations. Traumatic memory is stored without any connection to anything else, which is why it kind of pops up and wreaks havoc for us. So through the modality, it helps ground it, release it, and connect it. And what happens is transformative and quick. It goes deep fast. And so in anywhere from 1 to 3 sessions, you'll get some relief and sometimes full resolution, but certainly by 6 sessions or so, typically full resolution, unless it's more of a complex trauma, meaning developmental trauma, relational trauma, those sorts of things might take a little longer.
Understood. Understood.
Mm-hmm.
Would you recommend EMDR for people dealing with, PTSD?
Yeah, so EMDR is most effective for PTSD, phobias, anxiety, those sorts of things. It actually is the most transformative for those things. With that said, I share this example my TED talk to show you how it works, because you could say, oh, it's really effective for PTSD, but it is also for so many other things. Like in working with one woman who's struggling with her business and was really um, hitting some blocks and wasn't as successful as she wanted to be. So we used EMDR to get into her body a little bit, and we took the emotions, which is frustration and feeling trapped and shameful around her business. And where does she feel that in her body? All of that, paired that with bilateral stimulation. Well, it led to an earlier assault when she was younger, because the assault was storing those same emotions and sensations as the frustration with her business. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So EMDR is super effective for PTSD, like you said, but also can remove blocks to being more successful in your business. Does that make sense?
Totally, totally, totally. I can, relate and echo because there are a lot of similar experiences I have had in my life as well.
Mhm.
So I was recently sharing something because in a recent work that we did for one of our clients, the payment was stuck for over 2 weeks, and I just reach out. So we, as the podcast we are listening, also run an anonymous mental health platform where people come and went out, and a similar query came onto the platform where an entrepreneur shared that the payment is stuck and I'm feeling anxious and I don't know how to manage things because uh, being an entrepreneur myself for over last 8 years, I have gone through more or less every phase an entrepreneur would be in the Indian ecosystem and globally as well. So I could relate. And I was having discussion with the volunteers who share their responses and the guidance for the people who are anonymously, sharing their problems. So when the one of the volunteers said that the person does not have a good relationship with the money, and that's where all these points are coming out, I had to jump in and sort of discuss on this. Where I said that no, it's not always about the relationship with the money. You, as an individual, might have a very good relationship with the money, but it's also about the factors surrounding it. But yes, then another point came up was it might be all coming through one of the traumas or experiences with which that fear is now amplifying the anxiety out there.
Mhm.
So I could relate to it, and that made sense to me. So
Mhm.
I can totally understand where you're coming from and see EMDR being one of the ways which entrepreneurs who have gone through a lot of highs and lows in their journey can really look forward to, because globally and majorly what I have seen as an entrepreneur, it is often expected you to be always slogging out there, wearing your burnout as a badge of honor, and not really paying heed to your own emotional health. You're just expected to keep churning those successful numbers, irrespective of how you're personally living, how you're personally managing your emotions. I have seen a lot of entrepreneurs who have succeeded, but still are living under the burnout. Some who decided to probably hang up their boots a little early, but today are in a much more better shape emotionally. And they're happy. Okay, they said that, okay, it was an experience. We had it, probably not meant for us. I need to move forward in my life.
Yes.
So seeing all those people out there, I can relate to all your experiences and things that you're sharing.
Hmm. That makes sense to me. And when I think so much of this has to do with that ability to what's that word I'm thinking about? Trees do it, bridges do it, the flexibility, right? A nervous system have the flexibility to navigate from one end of the spectrum to the other. And when I think about entrepreneurs and burnout, where's the balance? Right?
Yeah,
And if we find balance, perhaps we'd be even more successful by so many standards or by different standards.
agreed, agreed. And just one thought that came to me, and probably I hope a VC or incubator is listening to this. If VCs, incubators can include emotional health management sessions as part of their journey to support entrepreneurs and make it really mandatory out there, not optional, but mandatory for entrepreneurs, founders to attend it. I believe they would have much more successful entrepreneurs, helping them generate better profits what they are today.
100%. You could see it with that one example with that woman I was working with. We repeat our patterns and they show up in our business, in our careers, in our work relationships. And with good quality mental health, you can transform that and become more productive and increase your numbers and feel better.
I do agree. Help me understand one thing, Tammy, out here. When we talk about, you know, breaking the patterns out there, because as an individual, I believe a lot of people are able to identify their patterns. It's just that a lot of variety of factors surrounding it, they're not working on it. It could be the zeal to work on it, or the availability or the accessibility of different therapies out there.
Yeah.
But let's say if somebody really wanted to start working on themselves, at their own end, without seeking external support,
Yes.
what could they do at their own individual level?
You're not going to be surprised to hear me say this. I would say get into your body. There's a lot of things you can do to help regulate a little bit. Certainly, cold plunges and meditation and yoga and breath work and all those sorts of things. And that's regulating and fantastic. And let's go a little deeper. So, give yourself a moment and a space to be curious about the sensations in your body. Be curious about discomfort that might be showing up emotionally. For me, I heard you talk about physical manifestations of stress a little bit. For me, if I'm not sleeping well, if I put my head in the pillow and my head's running, I know something's up, right? It's not that my head's running. It's not that I'm having difficulty sleeping. There's something else going on. So a simple way to do that is to ask that part. For example, if it's my head that's spinning, ask that part what it needs from me, or what its story is, or what it needs me to know. So, those simple questions will allow you to get into your body a little more and beyond my analysis necessarily, but more about what that story is. Or it could be, I think you mentioned back pain. You could sit with the back pain, certainly, but take that a step further and ask that pain. Well, before you ask it, let it know you can feel it. I feel you in my lower back. I feel it as a spasm and it really hurts. What do you need me to know? What is your story? What do you want to show me? What do you need from me? This is more internal family systems work, and it's a beautiful way of being curious about your own experience, connecting to different parts of you, and um, ultimately being in a state of I guess love and connection with what you need. And that is transformative in and of itself.
Uh, you brought a concluded with a point, love out there. I would briefly like to touch upon this, where the concept of self-love is finding its way towards, extinction. People are not really getting into their body, I would say, if I have to put it in your language. They're not really loving themselves, but seeking love from the outside.
Right.
They are finding validations, they are finding appreciations from the outside world. Whereas if they start moving from inside out, things are going to be much better.
100%. Like I said earlier, we've lost our way. Certainly, we're looking for the likes and the comments and those cheap dopamine hits, and truly, and I think you already know this, that what others think about me is absolutely none of my business, and it really doesn't matter, right? um, the negative comments are hurtful. The positive comments might make me feel better, but ultimately I'm being toggled between the two. Now I'm up and down. What if I was in such a place that no matter what was happening outside of me, that I was okay? And I feel like that is, I talk about this in my sessions a lot, in my life a lot, that I feel like that is the goal of therapy. That is the goal of life, that no matter what's happening outside around me, that I'm okay, that I can navigate it. And by all means, I don't mean everything's okay. The world could be at war. My daughter might be ill. A client might be angry with me, but still, I'm okay. I can navigate it all. I'm at ease and I'm at peace. That's the goal.
Help me evolve on this, Tammy, out here, where, when we say that we should be feeling okay when things are not working out on the outside world, things might be difficult. Now, people take it as being always in that state. Is it so that we are communicating that every time there's something bad happening or challenging happening, you have to be in the state of not letting it impact you? Or there can be instances where you are allowed to, you get impacted, but yes, your duration to get back to yourself is faster. What is
Yeah.
should be the usual case?
I think absolutely that's ultimately the goal, like back to that flexibility, that returning to self, that place of ease and okay. Doesn't mean you don't get hit with things. I just navigated the illness of a close family member over the last year, and that was profoundly difficult. And because a lot of the times I was still in that place of self, that everything wasn't okay, but I was okay. I was also able to see the gifts in all of it, right? It didn't take me down. There were moments, I mean, horrible moments and difficult moments. And still I could access joy, and still I could access hope. And I think in life and in therapy, that's really the goal. And whatever the modality is, whether it be EMDR that helps you access self more, or IFS, where working with those different parts, whether it be your back pain or the stress or whatever it is, that by getting closer to those parts, we allow ourself a little more space because we give them compassion and attention and whatever they need. They'll allow our space to have more access to self, where we feel regulated and grounded and at peace.
You mentioned about hope, right now. And if you're talking about relationship trauma out, help me understand with your experience with your clients out there in the previous years, what has been more, impacting your clients? Was it losing hope in a relationship or the breaking of trust? What really is up? I know both have their own equal space and equal weightage out there, but yes, what if to be chosen from either of the two? What is more disturbing, to lose hope or to have your trust broken?
Mm, that's a great question. I would have to say losing trust, because trust kind of goes both ways. It's trust in, I mean, a lot of ways, trust in self, trust in other. And I think that's more devastating in a lot of ways. Um, if I had to choose.
Yeah, totally, totally. And let's say somebody gets that, has to unfortunately go through that trust being lost in somebody.
Mhm.
How do they start their initial steps to, you know, gaining back that self-trust? Because at times when you lose trust in somebody else, you also lose a part of your own self-trust. How do you really start your journey on it to,
I,
navigate and find it back?
yeah, I think that's one step at a time. We ask that question, I think about someone struggling with the early stages of recovery and how how difficult that is to trust self, the world, other. Um, and it is one day, one moment, sometimes 1 minute at a time of making the highest and the decisions that are in your best and highest good. And with each decision that they build on each other. Does that make sense?
If you can elaborate a bit on this.
Yeah. So with each positive decision I make for myself, I'm building a foundation of trust in my life. So when I take the example of someone who's been struggling with addiction, who might be in early recovery, it's making those decisions to call my sponsor. Um, Instead of picking up a drink. Ultimately, I might pick up that drink, but I've made better decisions, right? And so I can return back to those more quickly. I'm starting to slowly build trust in myself by making the decision that is in my best and highest good.
Understood. Understood. And we also talked about, if I'm not wrong, IFS. So, what exactly is IFS? Before we conclude, I would like to briefly touch upon it.
Yeah, IFS stands for Internal Family Systems Therapy, and it was developed by Dick Schwartz, who for years was working with folks who had significant eating disorders, and he was trained in family systems therapy. And I believe, he was frustrated by the lack of progress. But spending the amount of time he did listening to his patients, he would hear, well, a part of me wanted to purge, but a part of me didn't. And so he developed family systems therapy, but on the inside. He usually starts his trainings by asking people if they have multiple personality disorder. I now know to raise my hand because the theory is really, and the belief is really that we are born with a self or capital S self. And that's, people can use different words for that, whether it be soul or divine or God, but that we're born with this core self, and that over the course of time in our lives, that we develop these other parts, whether they be protectors or firefighters, that really help us navigate the things that we're navigating, or they're internalized by what people have told us and our culture and our experiences. And that through the therapy, it's really the self witnessing, connecting with, and healing those other various parts that might be overworking. The way I see it is, think of an orchestra and a conductor. The self is the conductor, or the capital S self is the conductor, and the parts are all the folks playing the different instruments. And ideally, we want to be conducting well, but if our tuba player is too loud or out of tune or working too hard, perhaps the tuba player needs our attention and a little more instruction or love or whatever that part may need. And then it can play more beautifully. And once we have access to self energy, there is a real sense of connection and clarity, and what we mentioned before, which is self love.
That's
It's a flow state, if you will.
got it. Help me evolve on one, another point, Tammy, where since because we just talked about the family systems, and I recently witnessed something where, one of my close friends, she lost one of her close family members. And now, being part of the community from where I know her, I had a lot of other community members passing judgments about her. And I'm like, it's just been 3 or 4 weeks. I didn't say anything upfront to those community members, but I was just thinking within me that it's been just 3 or 4 weeks, and everybody has their own timeline to recover from something. You cannot be just pushing that if you were able to get out of it in a week or two. it's going to be applicable for that person. You need to give that person the space.
Yes.
Now, I got two different aspects I would like to understand. One, how, as an individual who is going through some form of trauma or loss or abuse, really avoid having an impact of the judgments being passed from people who are not aware of my story. That's the first part. And second, how we as individuals in the surrounding circles, whether inner or outer, be a little bit more empathetic towards that person and give them that space.
Yeah, I love those questions. I don't think there's any way of avoiding the judgments for sure. The way to ameliorate it with this particular person or anyone is to really to connect with them, back to the connection that there may be all the judgments, but hey, here I am showing up in love and connection with you. Um, your second question was, say that again.
So the second question was for the people in the surroundings, inner or outer circle, be a little bit more empathetic and supportive.
Yeah, I think what allows us as humans to be empathetic is the curiosity. So like you just said, we all have our own journey and experiences, and what may be difficult for me might be really easy for you. You could have the judgment of like, I don't know why that's taken her down. Like that's right. But we have different biology and different, childhoods and different experiences in the world. So I think the baseline is knowing that and then being curious. Well, if I would have expected her to be doing better now or differently now, what is going on for her? What is this about? Why is she suffering more? There's got to be more to the story for her. So curiosity, stay curious about your loved ones, your community members, and yourself. And through the curiosity, you'll get a lot of answers and connection, which allows us to heal.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. And before we, conclude, Tammy, any final message you would like to give to our listeners?
Yeah, I want to reiterate that everything we need is right inside of us, and if we get curious and connect to those different parts, that we will heal. It doesn't take an expert, even the folks that I work with, I always tell them I'm so grateful to be in this space for you, with you and for you. I'm simply a guide. I'm barely an expert in myself, and certainly not you. So if your space isn't to be with a mental health professional, be curious about your parts in yourself and connect.
Well, oh, thanks a lot, Tammy. Really, really appreciate, you taking your time and sharing your wisdom with our listeners.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot. And listeners, this episode helps us understand and unpack the deep connection between our mind, body, and the healing journey, all thanks to Tammy today. Her insights on why talk therapy sometimes falls short, how EMDR can be a game changer, and the ways to break free from hidden barriers are a reminder that healing is not a one size fits all process. It's a conversation between every part of us, and the journey starts from within. And if today's conversation sparked something in you, a question, a memory, or even a worry, we invite you to share it anonymously through our mental health platform. The links would be shared in the description below on all the platforms across. And let's keep the conversation going because remember, here we are listening.